Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Packernet Draft Room. This is the inaugural episode of a brand new podcast that I will be launching today. It's called the Draft Room, if you couldn't figure that out. I kind of was back and forth on whether or not I wanted to do this. The answer has always been yes, wanting to do NFL draft content. The biggest issue that I had, though, is that we cover some draft content, especially now during the draft, already on the Packers show. It's not that hard to figure out the difference, though, and that is this podcast is an NFL draft podcast the same way if I were to do an NFL podcast, there would be some overlap with the Packers podcast, but they would not be the same podcast. And so very simply, this will just be an NFL draft podcast. Obviously, it's going to be impossible to not highlight the Packers win possible. But this will give us an opportunity for some of the more, let's say, draft-intense folks that are out there to talk about the draft in a way that isn't so constrained to just Packers. Not everything has to have a Packers tilt to it or bend to it. It can be anything. And so just to give you an idea, there will be mock drafts. Obviously, that'll be a once-a-week deal, nice, clean, easy, whether that's one round, whether that's 2 round, I guess we'll have to see. I also plan on doing some team mock drafts. Again, not just the Packers. In fact, you'll find that over on the other show much more frequently. As well as just news, notes, and all kinds of other data revolving around the NFL draft. The other thing that I would like to do, and we'll see if this takes off, but I would like to add another phone number. So there will be the Packernet After Dark phone number and then another phone number. And this will be specifically for the draft room. And again, although there may be some confusion, which one should I call? It shouldn't be that super hard to figure out. Anything Green Bay Packers related, Green Bay Packers draft related, just go ahead and drop it there. If you have questions about Fernando Mendoza, if you have a question about quarterbacks not pertaining to a Malik Willis backup or something to that effect, something not, specifically Brian Gutekunst related, feel free to call in here. And in fact, you feel free to call in Packers stuff here too, if you so choose. That'll be entirely up to you. But welcome. And I can't think of a better way to kick this off than with a mock draft. So that is what we're going to do today. This will be the first episode of the Packernet Draft Room, hopefully the first of many. It's been a long time since I've added a show. The last time I did, it was at the encouragement of my wife to do Packernet After Dark, and I think that's gone very, very well. You'll be pleased to know this also was encouraged by my wife. I feel like I'm always the one that wants to do stuff. Very rarely does she have anything that she would like me to do, and she's like, well, why don't you... She's like, do you not have time to do another? She sounds like Nate. She's like, do you not have time to do a third podcast? Like, well, yeah, I do. Why don't you do another one? Fine. Maybe I will. But this is something I've wanted to do for a long time. I like the NFL draft. The issue is always a lot of people are not big NFL draft fans, and so you got to kind of tiptoe into the draft thing, and you better not talk about it during the season. This will give me the opportunity to do so. And yes, if you're wondering, this is not just for the next 2 months and then we're going to stop. The plan will be to continue this year-round, just like the other just like the other shows on the podcast. This will just be a forever staple. So, before we jump in, I just went ahead and set up the phone number, 608-561-3243. That's going to get real confused with that other number. But the number to call in for the Draft Room show is once again going to be 608-561-3243. Send in your calls. All right. Again, because this is sort of the inaugural, the other thing that's going to be different about this is in the Packers show, I have to assume not everybody is fully up to date on everything. Meaning we kind of baby our way through a lot of stuff. This is going to be... I'm even going to be punching above my weight a little bit with the assumption that these are people that are a little bit more up-to-date on NFL draft stuff. Again, if you have questions, feel free to call them in. But we're going to be talking as though there's at least a baseline understanding of some NFL draft stuff here, okay? Okie doke. With the first pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Las Vegas Raiders select, pause for effect as if everybody doesn't already know, Fernando Mendoza, quarterback out of Indiana. As I mentioned on the other show, generally speaking, what you'll find is in the first several picks, we largely have an idea of what's going to happen, and it gets rather boring. That's happened relatively early with the first pick this year. The rest of it gets a little bit interesting, but this one is about as locked in as you'll find. I haven't even seen the slightest bit of controversy on this. I'm sure as we get closer, some people will try. That'll happen sometimes when you get to a sort of peak boredom level where you'll start to hear crazy stuff. And it's almost all fake, but it'll happen. People will get bored and they'll start saying, I'm hearing this. It's not true. It's nonsense. Fernando Mendoza to the Raiders at 1. He's kind of got all the traits for a solid pocket quarterback. He's 6'5", which is massive, 225 pounds, big, strong arm, accurate guy. He's not getting as many like Josh Allen-y comps, more like Matt Ryan, which isn't as flashy or sexy, but they've all kind of settled into he's that, and that's awesome, and we want him, and that's it. Or Rich Gannon if you want to go the Raiders route. At pick 2 is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. There's definitely a strong favorite, but there's at least some discussion here. If Dante Moore was still in the equation, there would be discussion about that. Reportedly, he returned to school to avoid the Jets. Whether that report is true or not, I don't know, but it's hilarious. There are also questions about Ty Simpson, quarterback out of Alabama that's moving up the boards relatively quickly. Could he move up high enough? Probably not, and if anything, we're talking about the Jets' second pick here. The strong consensus right now seems to be, well, let's make the pick. That's how we'll do it. With the second pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the New York Jets select Arvell Reese, linebacker, Ohio State. So the biggest pushback against this, and this may be more general than specific to the Jets, but the biggest pushback is that some of the top prospects are not at premium positions, Arvell Reese being one of them. There's also Caleb Downs, there's Jeremiah Love, there's guys like that who are, safety running back that are seen as, all things being equal, they're top 5 prospects, but not top 5 in terms of positional value. The feeling is that a lot of these teams will not be selecting these low positional value positions. With that said, we're talking like 85% of mocks right now are looking at Arvell Reese as the pick for the Jets. It seems, I think if I was doing a what would I do mock, I don't think that would be my decision. We'll save that for another day. I think the biggest question for Arvell Reese is, are we talking about a potential Micah Parsons? I always kind of worry. I know obviously it did work with Micah Parsons, but I do worry about these guys that are supposedly these elite positionless players. If he's Micah Parsons, this is a no-brainer lock for Arvell Reese. What I worry about is this Isaiah Simmons, this sort of positionless weapon that can do anything. You can play linebacker, you can put him off the edge, you could drop him at safety, you do whatever you want. He's a freak. That's ultimately the question that needs to be answered is what is Arvell Reese? What can he give you? If he is just a pure off-ball linebacker, you can't draft him at 2. If it's so out there, just floating around, I don't know, but he could do anything, I don't want him. You have to tell me specifically that this guy can play linebacker and he can play edge and he can do it at a high level. In fact, I would rather you tell me this guy can be an elite edge rusher, that if for whatever reason you need to drop him into coverage like Micah, fine, but he's a pass rusher. That's pretty much what you need to tell me if you're drafting him at 2. Again, 608-561-3243, your thoughts. All right, with the third pick, the Arizona Cardinals will select Francis Mauigoa. I think a lot of this the discussion around the Cardinals is going to be around the quarterback. It's going to be around whether Kyler is going to return or not, or how that whole situation is going to reveal itself. Matt LaFleur's brother is now out there as the head coach. We'll see what his thoughts are. I'm sure they'll want his input on it, but it's sounding like he will not be returning. And March 15th is sort of that deadline when that decision needs to be made. Now, we're not really talking about quarterback, but we are talking about kind of a reset for this organization. But it is an organization that needs a lot of help. There are other questions you can go in a lot of different directions with this team. I've seen some people talk wide receiver. I think that is a vanity pick at this point when you have Michael Wilson and Marvin Harrison playing pretty solid football, especially when you figure they're probably not playing at what they should be playing at. And so I think offensive line, not only is it probably the best value when you talk about positional value and everything else, or certainly up there with guys like Bain, but you look at the offensive line situation, and it's really, really just not very good. They've got Paris Johnson over on the left side. That is solid, right? He's young. He's 24. He's playing really solid football. But very quickly, you start getting into issues. You've got Evan Brown, who is 29 and in the final year of his contract. You've got Hjalte Froholt, who is 30 and in the final year, or 29 in the final year of his contract. You've got Will Hernandez, who is a free agent this year and 31. You got Kelvin Beachum, who's 37 years old. You've got Jonah Williams, who's 29 years old and a free agent. I mean, it's a lot of 30-year-olds that are either free agents this year or in the final years of their contracts. You're going to have to start making a lot of moves here. Even if you're going to bring back a guy, you throw a couple pennies at Jonah Williams to see if you can get him to stay. You don't have long-term options anywhere except left tackle. And so although Arizona State, the hometown hero Jordan Tyson, might be appealing to a lot of people, that's just not smart. And so it really comes down to, are we taking Maui Goa or are we taking Spencer Fano at offensive tackle? There are the questions about edge rushers and all that kind of stuff, especially if Arvell Reese is there, which is not expected to happen. But I think offensive tackle is going to be the real question. He also is strictly a right tackle, so there's no question of, well, where do we stick him, because we already have a left tackle. Nope, you've got your left tackle, now you've got your right tackle, and we'll worry about the interior as we go along. It'll probably be some combination of bringing some guys back, kind of riding with Evan Brown and Froholt and whatever for their final years, in addition to, maybe bringing back Hernandez short term. Otherwise, again, working the draft and free agency and just seeing what we can do. Next up at 4, we have the Tennessee Titans, another team that definitely has a lot of issues to work through. Saleh is now the head coach over there. I think in some way the fact that there really isn't a solid quarterback option can kind of simplify things a little bit. You don't really need, again, we'll see about the quarterback out of Alabama and how fast and high he can rise. But at the end of the day, I think given the situation, you can really get yourself into best player available territory. And if you have the best player at a premium position in the top 5, there's no quarterback, there's no real franchise resetting person that you can go get right now, then you just sit on Ward and you go get that next best guy. And right now that seems to be the way a lot of people are thinking about this. There's kind of a there is a growing consensus, I guess you could call it, or a growing thought toward Carnell Tate. However, with the 4th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans will select Ruben Bain, edge rusher out of Miami. There's also a question about David Bailey, the edge rusher out of Texas Tech. Again, that's kind of a 2.0 sort of a question. We're going to stick to the consensus, not only the consensus board over at NFLMockDraftDatabase.com, which is a good resource among many, but also the consensus among where mock drafters have the Tennessee Titans going. That's definitely an interesting question. Feel free to call that in if you disagree. But right now, Ruben Bain has been the most popular pick, and it does make sense. Their edge rushers in Tennessee are not good. They just got a defensive mind to be the new head coach. They're going to need a pass rusher. I mean, who even, I don't even know who you could say is their top pass rusher over there. Jihad Ward is 32 years old and a free agent after the conclusion of the 2025 season, whenever that takes place. He's a free agent. Arden Key, the other top pass rusher for their team, is 30 years old and a free agent. I mean, I understand that, Ayo Manor and Chimere Dike, shout out Dike, by the way, might not be your favorite wide receivers in the world, along with Calvin Ridley, but I don't care. We're not taking a wide receiver here. Bain is also kind of described as a Saleh guy, 6'3", 275. Saleh has an affinity for guys, the Eric Armstead types, these big, versatile, heavy-handed folk. There are some arm length questions, but, again, as of right now, they're questions. Until they become more than questions, we'll just leave it at Ruben Bain here. All right, and then at pick 5, we have the New York Giants. This one's pretty tough because, my first thought when I'm just kind of grazing here, I'm looking at this team and I'm saying, okay, we need some offensive line help. We need DB help, right? You could talk about corner, safety, whatever. Couldn't hurt to maybe look at, it's early for linebacker. The point is there's a lot of needs in a lot of different places. I don't know that wide receiver, which has Malik Nabers on it, as well as Wan'Dale Robinson, who's not a terrible wide receiver, I don't know that that's my top priority yet. The most popular picks, the two most popular picks, are wide receivers, even independently, not just combined, independently. If you combine positionally, it's not even close. Wide receiver is the most popular pick for the Giants. The biggest reason for that seems to be, number one, we've got Dart. We have to do everything we can. Let's load up on wide receivers. But beyond that, Malik Nabers did tear his ACL, and it's not just a question of when will he be back and filling in that gap for when he returns, which would be incredibly short-sighted to talk about a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year prospect in terms of how he helps us in the next 3 months before Malik Nabers comes back. But also a question of, will Malik Nabers ever be that top prospect again? And now you start talking about having Malik Nabers as your number 2, with Robinson in the slot. It's a very promising group. I still don't love the idea of doing that with a banged-up Dart behind a bad offensive line. I mean, it's like I feel like we're talking about the Wish version of the Cincinnati Bengals here, where we have lesser wide receivers, a lesser quarterback, and just as bad of an offensive line asking the same questions about protecting our quarterback. But that does seem to be the discussion. If it was me, we're probably talking Spencer Fano. But today we won't be making that decision. With the 5th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the New York Giants will select Carnell Tate, wide receiver, Ohio State. Now, you got to feel relatively good about that, given the pedigree of all these Ohio State guys and how they've started to look. The Seahawks are a brand new team, thanks to Jackson Smith and Jigba, and a few other things, but we'll give a lot of credit to that guy. Seems to be one of the more can't-miss things is drafting a first-round wide receiver out of Ohio State. And Carnell Tate being this high says a lot about where he ranks even among the other Ohio State wide receivers. All right, why don't we take our first break? We'll be right back, ripping through the next, 10 or so, 10 to 15. We'll be right back. I mentioned NFL Mock Draft Database as being a really solid resource. Let me plug my own website if I would do so. Such an idiot. NFLDraftGrades.com. Build your own big boards, do your own mock drafts. You can even do group mock drafts if you got a group of friends over in the Facebook group or whatever. Get a group of 32 people together, 20 people, 15 people, doesn't really matter. And go do some group mock drafts. We'll be doing that together here as well. I'll be talking about that a lot more over on the Facebook group, trying to coordinate that as well as with some of the guys over on Patreon. If we can even get like 10 together, I think that would be a fun little ditty. There's also an analytics tab over here, which is very cool once we start getting more people doing mock drafts. That is going to be a really awesome asset. Also in the mock drafts, there are some extra added features that are, I believe for now, all under the free tier because there's nobody here and I want people to play with it. For the mock draft, you've got a thing called like scenario mode where you can force certain players to fall. You can force teams to pick a certain position. You can remove a player from the draft. Different things like that to customize a draft to make sure that things kind of fit the way that you feel that they may go. You can have a custom draft order if you believe that there's going to be some kind of a trade off the, prior to the draft or whatever. And then there's also a thing called batch simulations where you can run simulations 10 times, 25, 50, or 100 different times to kind of see the statistical outcomes of those different things, which I thought was kind of a cool thing. These are all in there. They're all for free right now over at NFLDraftGrades.com. Okie doke. Pick up the pace here a little bit at pick 6 for the Cleveland Browns. Another team with a new coach in Todd Monken. There is some talk here, like in a lot of these other places. Could we possibly be talking Ty Simpson at this point? As of right now, looking at the mock drafts, the answer would be definitely not, but those conversations are happening out there in the world. I don't know how you replace an MVP quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, but, crazier things have happened. I think the most popular pick has been Carnell Tate, who just went off the board. That is not only a popular pick just because of who he is and because of the needs of the team and all that, but he's also the hometown Ohio kid. In this case, unlike the Giants, I could see that as one of the bigger needs. I mean, they do have some really solid defensive pieces, so there's not as many needs there. So that wouldn't be as frustrating to go out and get a wide receiver. However, I do think Carnell Tate being taken off the board, pending whether they go Jordan Tyson or not, could end up working to their benefit because I do think the bigger and the bigger need here is going to be the less popular pick, and that is offensive line. So, with the 6th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Cleveland Browns will select offensive tackle Spencer Fano, another right tackle. He has played some left tackle, specifically in his rookie year, but he switched over in year 2, which is when he really exploded over at right tackle. That's perfectly fine because Cleveland kind of needs a little bit of everything. Their right and left tackle situations are complete and utter disasters, with Jack Conklin completely bottoming out and Cam Robinson kind of never being good at anything. Also, their entire offensive line are free agents. Cam Robinson's a free agent. Joel Petonio's a free agent. Ethan Posick is a free agent. Wyatt Teller is a free agent. Jack Conklin is a free agent. Even backup guard Tevin Jenkins is a free agent. They do have DeJuan Jones, who I'm sure they're hoping can be quite good at football. So, DeJuan Jones and Spencer Fano will be their tackles potentially for the future. I don't really know, but it's a disaster. They need help. That's the plan. With the 7th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Washington Commanders select David Bailey, edge rusher out of Texas Tech. It's one of those things when you look at it and just think, I don't know if he's going to make it, man. This just feels too easy for Washington. I mean, it's just a slam dunk pick of a guy that just falls right into their lap here. And when you're talking about a top pass rusher like that, it seems like he should be gone. However, it's mostly been premium positions with the exception of Reese, maybe, that have gone. But this one seems easy for the Washington Commanders. There really isn't a ton of debate on this one. Assuming Reuben Bain is gone, David Bailey is clearly the top guy. There's a little bit of talk about Caleb Downs, but Washington needs they need a lot of help in a lot of places, but the defensive line edge in particular, Jacob Martin, Preston Smith, Drake Jackson, Von Miller, Dietrich Wise, all free agents. Frankie Louvu, Durant Armstrong in the final years of their deal. Obviously, some of these guys are getting re-signed, but it just goes to show they need to make some moves here. They got to figure something out, and they need that premier pass rusher. As for the Saints at 9, again, like with a lot of these teams, you're going to have some quarterback conversations, but I would assume Tyler Shaw is going to be that guy. At least, why not try it out? He actually did not look terrible in his little bit of playing time toward the second half of the season, especially since it was the second half of the season. He comes in the second half, plays pretty decent. He's a second-round pick. Why not see what you can do? So with that being said, with the 9th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints select the Kamara replacement, Jeremiah Love, running back out of Notre Dame. Now, this is one of those things where I get to be a crotchety old man and say, well, we should probably look at a different position, blah, 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 blah. But why not? Why not? Shaw looked decent. You got Olave, who's pretty solid. Offensive line could probably use some retooling for sure, but it's something. You got Fuaga sitting there that could potentially grow in year 3. I don't freaking know. Kelvin Banks looks pretty solid on the other side. We need some guards, but we can figure that out later. But Kamara's still there, but he's obviously, how old is Kamara now? He is he's 30 and a half, so he's going on 31 in this upcoming season. Obviously, he has not been peak Kamara for some time. So you get a Kamara-esque, Jahmyr Gibbs-esque type of player and, see what you can do. Have a little fun with it. I think I said that was pick 9. That was pick 8. With the 9th pick, you have the Kansas City Chiefs. Most popular pick by far for the Kansas City Chiefs is Jeremiah Love. Jeremiah Love just got taken off the board. So that's going to be one of those fun storylines also, is certain people hoping, please, please, please go a different direction so we can get our guy. Could they possibly trade up to try to get him? Blah, 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 blah. If not, I'm just going to have a lot of angry Chiefs fans, who are in a rare position, by the way, to be picking inside of the top 10. The guy at this point who is falling down is Caleb Downs. That's the guy that's going to have to find a home sooner than later. Could have gone to the last team for sure. Could have gone a couple different times. But it becomes a question of, at some point, somebody's going to take him. He's not going to fall much further than this. The next most popular pick has been, let's say a pass rusher, depending on who's available. At this point, it looks like it would be Keldrick Falk out of Auburn as a potential pick. The real interesting thing here, and I can't imagine that they would do this at this point. They used to make vanity picks when they were, winning Super Bowls and picking at pick 32, where they would take a running back or something. There's quite a few people selecting Kenyon Sadiq, who is the tight end out of Oregon. On the consensus board, he's at 18, which means you're at 9, picking somebody that is barely a top 20 pick. What, simply because you might be losing a guy? I understand that you've kind of been purging weapons and all that kind of stuff, but if you're going to go that route, you'd probably rather take somebody like Jordan Tyson that's a better value. Honestly, I think this is where I'm going to have to make the executive decision to just take the best player by far. You can get mad all you want, but it's not like you've got elite safeties here with Chamari Connor and Brian Cook. Brian Cook had a good year, but it was his first good year out of 4 years. I don't know that that's a lock to continue happening. And again, even if it is, put him on the other side. Chamari Connor, some kind of elite prospect that I'm not aware of. So with the 9th pick, the Kansas City Chiefs will select Caleb Downs, safety, Ohio State. Then we get to the Cincinnati Bengals. Most popular pick, Caleb Downs. Well, too bad. You don't get him. So another thing I noticed people like to do a lot is they'll get mad because they found a way to make the draft work really nicely. So they'll get upset, like, why did you do that? He could have gone to the Bengals the next round. Because I'm drafting for the Chiefs, and I'm not concerned about what the Bengals want in that moment. Anywho, with the 10th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select Peter Woods, defensive tackle, Clemson. I didn't make up my mind until the words came out of my mouth, but look, the Bengals need a lot of help in a lot of places. It kind of depends on what the board is looking like. I think like I said, the biggest thing is getting that safety. It's what everybody wants. The other big, several storylines, but as Packer fans know, the drought that Packer fans had with first-round wide receivers, that is nothing compared to the first-round drought for defensive tackles for the Cincinnati Bengals. Apparently, the Bengals have not drafted a defensive tackle in the first round since 1994, when they drafted Dan Wilkinson. So as I'm looking at this, Sonny Styles, the linebacker out of Ohio State, is popular, and that makes a lot of sense because their linebackers are awful, and they absolutely need help. But there are other needs, and the defensive line is maybe not as big of a need, but obviously much more value-driven. And so it's kind of an inverse relationship between worst position and biggest value. Edge with Hendrickson is the best of the three, followed by defensive tackle, followed by linebacker. Linebacker is at 12 on the consensus board. Edge is at 13. Defensive tackle is at 14. I think given the positional value, I would skip Sonny Styles. The question then becomes, do you break the chain, go get a defensive tackle, ride out Eric Hendrickson as much as you possibly can, with the additional fact that you drafted Shamar Stewart. He did get injured, so there's some potential that he can come back and strong and be that Hendrickson replacement, and in the meantime be that number 2. That's kind of the way that I would lean on this, going and getting Woods. The other option is just to draft Keldrick Falk, the edge rusher out of Auburn, and say that's the positional need thing. It's what the Bengals have been doing now, is focusing more on edge than defensive tackle. Hendrickson's going to be leaving. We don't really see much from this guy we drafted last year, and even if we do, we're going to need more than one. Or again, Sonny Styles. But I think the thing that makes the most sense to me is to focus on the defensive tackle. The run defense was terrible. A lot of that is the linebacker, but a defensive tackle obviously would help. Defensive tackle could potentially even help these linebackers to possibly take a step. In addition, we can get linebackers later. Okay, we don't have to take a linebacker at pick 10. Anywho, with the 11th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Miami Dolphins select Mansour Delane. Now, apparently this was somewhat of a controversial pick recently by Mel Kiper. It is actually a relatively popular pick as of right now. I don't know if Kiper kicked that off or what, but it makes a lot of sense to me. I think edge rusher also would work with Keldrick Falk here. They could use the help there, but just looking at their situation, Jack Jones, Rasul Douglas, Fedi Melifonwu, Kader Kohu, Elijah Campbell, AJ Green, Artie Burns, all free agents. They're all a lot of them anyways, 30-ish-year-old free agents. In addition, Julius Brents is in the final year of his deal. He's 26, probably getting another one, but they need bodies at corner. Absolutely. Rasul Douglas had a pretty good year, but it was an outlier year, and he is 30 years old. And I don't think that is, again, free agent. Even if you bring him back, I don't know that that's a great solution. We need better solutions here. So, are Bradley Chubb and Chop Robinson the greatest in the world? No, but we have them under contract for a while, and we'll see how it goes. With what are we at here? 12th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Dallas Cowboys select Sonny Styles, linebacker out of Ohio State. We're kind of back to consensus, actually, at least for a little bit. I think this happened last year with Dallas, too. It was kind of weird. They picked around the same time, and everybody kind of had them picking a certain person, and they didn't actually end up picking them. But anywho, versatile guy. He can play the run, the pass, he can blitz, all that stuff, which is a big question mark now is, do we have guys that can blitz now that we've lost Micah Parsons? Quinnen Williams was a big get. Clark will help with run defense. Ziraku, I already forgot how to say his name after last year. Looked pretty decent in his first year. Clowney's old, but he's there. Assuming they bring him back. I don't know. Probably not. But at linebacker, they need some help. And so I think it makes sense to go with the Sonny Styles guy, modern NFL linebacker. And we're not in the top 5 anymore, so I think positional value, it's not necessarily out the door, but we're in range that a premier linebacking talent can be taken. Next up, we got the Rams. This one is also going to be relatively straightforward, depending on which players are available. For example, Mansour Delane, is he there? I think the one interesting question, well, there's probably a couple. But again, we'll bring up the Ty Simpson discussion out of Alabama, the quarterback. It's not the direction anybody would want to go. You've got Matt Stafford, and he played at such an unbelievably high level. But he's not going to be around much longer. Do we continue pushing and go for broke with Stafford? Probably. Or do we do the grown-up responsible thing and try to find a replacement quarterback? Discussion for another day. With the 13th pick, the LA Rams select Jermod McCoy, cornerback, Tennessee. if we're not going to talk about quarterback, we could maybe talk wide receiver if you're going to say that, you got Nakua and Adams, but Adams, I don't know how much longer he's going to be there and producing at a high level. And so maybe we try to find like a number 2 to go with Nakua, especially in a situation where Jordan Tyson, like he is falling. I think it's a worthwhile conversation. Linebacker, maybe if Sonny Styles is there, could you talk yourself into that? Maybe. But I think if you had to pick a single spot on this team where you just went, man, everything is great except for kind of over here, you're probably going to say corner as a group. And so it's a pretty, like I said, it's a relatively straightforward. It is the most popular pick right now for the Rams is Jermod McCoy, with Mansour Delane being the second most popular pick, meaning corner in general is definitely standing out. In fact, I think it would be interesting to kind of ask the question, if we assume Jordan Tyson was there, what would be the most popular pick? I do wonder if that would take the lead, but we're not going to go there today. With the 14th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Baltimore Ravens will select Jordan Tyson, wide receiver, Arizona State. So this is one of those executive decision things. It's not a very popular pick for the Ravens, probably because he's not usually around at this point. In this situation, looking at what they have, it's not that they don't have players playing at a decent level, but you've got DeAndre Hopkins at going on 34 years old. That's not massively sustainable. Zay Flowers is a good player, no question about it. But if you remove Hopkins from the equation, Jordan Tyson's just too intriguing of a prospect to allow to slip at this point. So there you go. With the 15th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will select Kendrick Falk, edge rusher out of Auburn. The second most popular pick, the first one is gone, is Cassius Howell. Cassius Howell is an edge rusher. You can make the case that that's a better pick, this, that, or the other. We're going to stick with the big board that we have and take the top of the board edge rusher, that is Kendrick Falk. There's a lot of different things that you could say that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers need, but one of the talking points has been that the pass rush is just kind of non-existent right now. Yaya Diaby is not terrible, but they are not what they used to be. Linebacker is another one that makes a lot of sense, and depending on who's available, you could go that direction, but right now, edge rusher is definitely the right call. And now is when it gets kind of interesting, getting back to that initial question of Ty Simpson, because we are at the Jets' second option. We talked about how at pick 2, could they possibly, maybe if he continues to skyrocket up the boards, it's not out of the realm of possibility, especially if we talk about possibly trading back to maybe the back of the top 10 or something. But considering the guy is still sitting here, and it is a need for the Jets, and is the second highest player currently on our big board, I think now would make the most sense. So with the 16th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the New York Jets select Ty Simpson, quarterback out of Alabama. With the 17th pick, we have the Detroit Lions on the board. I think it's kind of funny because very similar to the Packers, when you look at what they've been trying to do, especially what they tried to do this past year, I think everybody, especially in the NFC North, as we looked at, wanted to build in the trenches. Everybody wanted to be the Philadelphia Eagles. We wanted to build in similar to the Packers and probably some other teams. Despite that, the priority is the trenches. If you're looking at where the Lions need to focus, it's offensive and defensive line. Finding that Aiden Hutchinson counterpart, defensive tackle help, offensive line help. The most popular pick has been Caden Proctor, and he is probably the highest outside of one interior offensive lineman. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger because it does make sense with Taylor Decker being 31 years old. So with the 17th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions will select Caden Proctor, offensive tackle out of Alabama. For the Vikings, not surprisingly, the thing that they've been trying to get is the thing that they will continue to try to get, and that is cornerback. If it was too much of a reach, I wouldn't do it, but it's not. So with the 18th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Minnesota Vikings will select Avion Terrell, cornerback, Clemson. Strangely, the second most popular pick is Emmanuel Warren, the safety out of Toledo. On the consensus board, he's at 36, so that's a very odd thing. I don't know if safety is just such a big need that it's just the next one available kind of thing. But Jermod McCoy is number 3, so corner, clearly the top option here, and we're not going to reach into a second-round prospect for a safety. So Avion Terrell to the Minnesota Vikings. As you notice, we always have to, every time I do a mock draft, it starts off 10 minutes per pick, and it turns into, I got 30 seconds a pick here. With the 19th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Carolina Panthers will select Kenyon Sadiq, tight end out of Oregon. Peter Woods is the most popular pick right now for the Panthers, at least, in recent history. He is obviously gone. Sadiq does make sense, though. I think defensive help across the board is worth discussing, but their tight end situation is disastrous. And so when you potentially pair them with a guy like Teteroa McMillan, we can start talking about having a formidable offensive group here, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Especially considering the offensive line is really not terrible. Bryce Young could have some impressive weaponry to work with. But with the 20th pick, the pick that the Dallas Cowboys got from the Green Bay Packers, it's getting a little bit tough at this point. We took a linebacker with the first run through in Sonny Styles, and again, that was a pretty popular pick. There really is not a consensus on that second pick. Some double down talk with C.J. Allen, possibly looking at edge for reasons that we've already kind of discussed, which is possible TJ Parker-ish. But I think the one that makes a little bit more sense to me anyway would be to go ahead and grab a cornerback. They did draft Savone Revel, who was expected to be a really good corner. He fell to the 3rd. His injury issues popped up immediately and was terrible when he was on the field. Deron Bland was kind of a flash in the pan thing. He had kind of one good year. And so, although you could say it's a little bit of a reach, we're going to go with Brandon Cisse, I think is how you say his name. Looks like Sissy, but I don't think that's right. All right, we'll take a break, and we'll come back and rip through the last of these 12 picks. We'll be right back. Next up, we have the presumably, hopefully, fingers crossed, Aaron Rodgers, Mike McCarthy, Pittsburgh Steelers up at pick 21. And I tell you what, we're going to give Rodgers what he's always wanted. It's top guy on the board. I think it's a need. With the 21st pick in the draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver, USC. Yes, we have DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is an option, but we are going to be transitioning away from our Art Lemon for some reason, our Art Smith run-heavy attack, more toward a Mike McCarthy pass-heavy attack. And so, yeah, we have 28-year-old DK Metcalf, and that's great. What else do we have? We got Adam Thielen and Marquez Valdez-Scantling? Yeah, no, we're going to go get some more help. You're welcome, Rodgers. That is, by the way, the most popular pick right now for the Steelers. It makes sense. With the 22nd pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, we have another very strong consensus here, which is even going back a long ways. The last 2 weeks, over the last month, over the last 2 months, it has been one guy all along. I'm going to do my best to pronounce this one. With the 22nd pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the LA Chargers will select Olivavanga Ioane. Olivavanga Ioane. All right, there we go. Maybe it's Olivavanga. I don't know. Interior offensive lineman out of Penn State. Very strong consensus on this pick here. Obviously, desperately need some interior offensive line help. There isn't a ton of competition in terms of other interior offensive linemen until you get to the back of the first, early second round area. So this has kind of been locked in. Obviously, again, you play some war games, you play around a little bit. What are some other options? What if he goes early? What if somebody trades up in front? All that kind of stuff. But today, we'll keep it simple. And actually, I don't know why there's the difference here, because if you look at the main page here, I mean, again, that is by far the top, and this guy isn't even on here. But on the main page, if I look over here, another name that's been popping up for them is Jennings Dunker, which I don't want to see him going this early, but I get it. At 23, the Philadelphia Eagles, very far from a consensus here. It's really all over the map. Kenyon Sadiq has been kind of the biggest name, although he is gone, so that's obviously not going to be a thing. From where I'm sitting, though, this is kind of a two-man race, and it comes down to two different things here. The third highest guy left on our board is Caleb Lomu, the offensive tackle out of Utah. You say, well, why do they need that? They got Lane Johnson, and he's got an extension through however long. Well, he's going to be 36 years old. There's some talk that he may retire after this season, and I guess their offensive line coach would like, again, this is rumor mill stuff, would like his next offensive tackle project immediately. They have a very highly respected offensive line coach. They're likely to listen to what he has to say. It would not be surprising, although in the first round it's rough for a team trying to make a push. There's some potential that we're looking for the future there. The other option would be our fourth highest prospect, Denzel Boston, wide receiver out of Washington. Again, why do we need that when we got two really good wide receivers? Well, the reason being the rumors that A.J. Brown may not stay with this team. Tight ends are really not plentiful. There is nobody worth reaching for at this point. You're not looking for a corner, probably not looking for a linebacker. You could talk me into safety if you so felt inclined. But I think it comes down to Lomu and Boston, and I'll just go based off of what we have here, which is over the last 2 weeks, who has been more drafted, and that is Denzel Boston, at least by a little bit. So with the 23rd pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select wide receiver Denzel Boston out of Washington. Very frustrating, by the way, for Browns fans, as Denzel Boston is the most popular pick for the Browns at their second spot, especially given how we went through this, because we had them taking Spencer Fano with Carnell Tate being gone. So missed out on Carnell Tate by one pick, and then missed out by Denzel Boston by one pick. The second most popular pick would be Lomu, but we just took Spencer Fano. So unless you're taking two, which is not as crazy as it sounds, we'd have to look a different direction. If you did want a wide receiver, Kevin Concepcion is the next guy up on the list. And actually, it's not a terrible option. Guys like Dane Brugler and a lot of other local guys for the Cleveland Browns are looking at KC Concepcion. In Todd Monken's offense, a slot receiver carries a lot of weight, and that is Concepcion. Jerry Jeudy did not have a fantastic season, obviously. I think it honestly does make a good amount of sense. In fact, it's kind of interesting. I mentioned the success of Zay Flowers in Baltimore. That is a Monken thing. Zay Flowers is a slot guy. Zay Flowers had a lot of success in Baltimore with Monken. That also happened in Georgia when you're talking about Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey. So one way to look at it is slot guys have success, and so you can look at Malachi Corley and just say he's going to blow up, or you can say, kind of a hybrid of that. Their slot guy is going to blow up and is going to be incredibly important, so let's go get a really good slot guy. But I guess he likes to use a lot of what's called middle read. He uses option routes a lot for his slot guys, and so there's a lot of thought about, I don't know if it's a lot, but there's thought about Shedeur Sanders kind of getting on that same level with a slot guy like that, to where, if you can get on the same page and see what each other sees as far as the defense, these option routes can be phenomenal. Monken also is very, very good with mesh concepts and getting these slot options open. So I'm going to go ahead and talk myself into that. With the 24th pick via the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Cleveland Browns select Kevin Concepcion, wide receiver, Texas A&M. Next up at pick 25, we have the Chicago Bears. Obviously, on the normal podcast, we're not going to try to do them any favors, but here today, we have to. This one feels obvious to me, and maybe it's less obvious than I'm thinking, but it's got to be defensive line. And I don't necessarily mean defensive tackle. I mean somewhere along that defensive line between defensive tackle and edge, that has to be the priority. They fixed their offensive line. They have a quarterback. The offensive line is older, so you could certainly get younger if you wanted to. You got your tight end. You got wide receivers, even if DJ Moore were to be leaving soon. You got Burden and Odunze. Running back situation seems fine. I know there's rumors about them possibly going out and getting a guy in free agency. And so you're looking at the defense. And I think you like your corners. You feel okay about your linebackers, right? Your safeties, again, you feel decent about it. There's always age questions like with Byard. I don't know his long-term status or viability with the team. But all of those things, in my opinion, pale in comparison to the need on the defensive line. They ranked 30th in total sacks, and that just can't happen, especially when you're a playoff team and you feel like you're just going to keep getting better, and you had I don't want to say terrible defense, because obviously with all the takeaways, the defense didn't end up that terrible, but if the picks go away, this defense is going to be bad. You have to be able to get to the quarterback. And so the top prospect here is an edge rusher. In fact, the top two are defensive linemen. But I'm not going to overthink this. I am going to take the top available prospect, who is an edge rusher, and that is Mr. Cassius Howell, edge rusher out of Texas A&M. That probably will get some pushback, and maybe I shouldn't have done that because I'm trying to stick to what the most popular picks are. And defensive tackle is definitely something bigger than edge among people doing mock drafts for the Bears. In fact, the most popular pick by quite a bit is Caleb Banks. He's not even the next available defensive tackle based on the consensus board. Not that that matters, because I've seen his name come up a couple times. That would be Caden McDonald. That is the next most popular, followed by Lee Hunter. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Should I not do that? Because that's another defensive tackle. I'm going to change my pick. I apologize. The top three are all defensive tackles. Apparently, Bears fans do not feel as bad with Sweat being there, which is fine, I guess. But I don't know. It felt like kind of a need. And plus, I thought they liked Dexter Lawrence. I know he went back. I think he's overrated, but I thought Bears fans loved him. Apparently not so much. I apologize. I am going to draft Caden McDonald, defensive tackle, out of Ohio State. I didn't actually make the pick yet on my NFLDraftGrades.com/mock draft. Should get rid of that and make it mock draft. It'd be easier. Caden McDonald, defensive tackle, out of Ohio State for the Chicago Bears. It is pretty wild when you look at, again, Caleb Banks, by far the biggest in terms of picks, followed by Caden McDonald, and then followed by Lee Hunter, and then a safety in Dylan Thieneman. So, yeah, that's not even close. Okay, Buffalo Bills next on the clock. This is another one that's very straightforward in terms of what is a popular pick, which I appreciate, especially in the later rounds. Usually I expect it to be wide open. It's really not. I don't know how far back this goes. It's pretty close, but Concepcion is the other guy, and he's already gone. I mean, it goes back at least a month. So with that, with the 26th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Buffalo Bills select C.J. Allen, linebacker, Georgia. I think, obviously there's been some turnover in Buffalo right now. But there's also this question of Super Bowl window and how do we capitalize on this? And I think the weakness is seen to be the defense that's being held together by duct tape a little bit. It's not to say they don't have some seriously good pieces, because they do. They've got some incredible pieces with, Gregory Rousseau has really started to break out. You got Joey Bosa, who's still got a little bit left in the tank on the other side. I mean, the defensive line, Oliver and Daquan Jones is a solid player. Again, age isn't a factor, but good players. Linebacker, though, is a big issue. I mean, you could say corner, linebacker, safety, all could use a little bit of help, but linebacker is just a serious problem. Milano has just gone straight downhill since about 2022. Terrell Bernard, third-round pick in 2022, has just not panned out at all. So they just need some help there. Shaq Thompson is 32. So I think getting that alpha signal caller in the middle, and that's what he is too. This isn't just some like coverage intellectual, although he is seen as like a high IQ guy out of Kirby Smart's defense. He is a downhill smash mouth linebacker. And so he is kind of seen as the Milano replacement, Milano being older, injured, all that kind of stuff. Bills defense ranked 28th against the run, despite the fact that, again, they've got some decent players on the defensive line, more pass rushers than run defenders, but still, you shouldn't be that bad, and they are. So it's a huge need. It's what they need. It's what they're going to get. As for the 49ers, if you look at the most picked players, it's guys that they're long gone. So it's a lot of 49ers fans dreaming up some stuff. I think part of the discussion with the 49ers is kind of similar to the Kansas City Chiefs, where we had all these weapons, and I don't know that we have a lot of weapons anymore. George Kittle is still beyond elite, but the guy is 32 years old. He is coming off a torn Achilles that he suffered. How much longer can this guy prop up your offense? At the wide receiver situation, you got the 49ers voiding Ayuk's 2026 guarantees after he goes AWOL during his injury rehab. Juwan Jennings is going to be a free agent. Pearsall has been struggling with his health. You know, I mean, if you just look at the pieces, you go, oh, they don't need any help there. But they really do, which doesn't even really bring up the fact that Christian McCaffrey's been dealing with a ton of injuries and is going to be 30 years old very soon. So all of their weapons are a serious question mark. There's more, though. You could seriously look at offensive tackle, considering Trent Williams, one of the best to ever do it, what a freaking legend, is 37 years old. How much longer can that guy stick this out? But wait, there's more. The defensive line, outside of Nick Bosa, who also has been dealing with injury issues and hardly played last year, is horrific. They're terrible. Micah Williams, rookie pick number 11 last year, which, by the way, the 49ers really have not, maybe you could say hit or miss with the drafting, but they've had some really bad drafts, especially along the defensive line. I mean, congratulations on nailing Bosa at pick 2, but how many defensive linemen are you going to swing and miss on? Micah Williams was terrible. And then you got Jordan Elliott on the interior, who is just horrific. Kalia Davis, don't even know much about that guy. Terrible. It's not a good situation at all. Not to mention, again, how many guys are free agents? Cleveland Ferrell is a free agent. Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, Gross Matos. Then you got Keon White and Bryce Huff in the final years. It's rough. But wait, there's more. How is this team even viable? Their corner group is bad. Renardo Green and Diamador Lenoir, however you say the guy's name, not good. Not very good corners. And then the linebacker group, obviously elite with Fred Warner, but Fred Warner's, he's played, 5 games and is going to be 30? And then they have nothing outside of that. I mean, you talk about a team that is a couple years away from complete implosion. It's the 49ers. So in a way, you can kind of do whatever you want. For example, the top available player is edge rusher out of Texas A&M, Cassius Howell. Would that make sense? Of course it would make sense. Bosa needs help, and he's also hurt, more often than not. How about Caleb Lomu, the offensive tackle? Does that make sense? Yes, it does. TJ Parker, edge rusher. Does that make sense? Yes. Caleb Banks, defensive tackle. Yes. Akeem Mesidor, edge rusher out of Miami. Yes, please. Monroe Feeling, offensive tackle. Yes. Colton Hood, corner. Yes. Emmanuel Prignon, the offensive line interior guy out of Oregon. Sure. It's not like Spencer Burford is doing us any favors. How about Anthony Hill, the linebacker? Yes. Emmanuel Warren, safety out of Toledo. Wouldn't be my top pick, but sure. I mean, you got 2 guys that are at least mediocre there, so it's, not ideal and young. Maybe the only position I would say, yeah, let's just not. That or quarterback, maybe. Anywho, all that to say, they're in a position right now where I think best player available is it. They might panic and do the whole, window thing, in which case I don't even know what you're going to get. Edge rusher potentially could make sense. Wide receiver, I don't know. But you really need to do best player available. And for us on our board, Cassius Howell, edge rusher, Texas A&M. Houston Texans at 28, very similar situation. There are leanings, but not a consensus player. The very heavy lean is offensive line, though. The top three are the interior guy, Pregnon, followed by Monroe Freeling and Caleb Lomu. All three are offensive linemen. I think the bottom line here is that C.J. Stroud is in free fall as a quarterback. His rookie year was his best year. His second year was good, but not as good. His third year was kind of bad. And you have to get this offensive line thing figured out. And they've got a good team outside of that. I mean, the pass rush duo is insane. The defense is ridiculously solid. Nico Collins is still an elite player. Tank Dell is still a phenomenal player, even though we didn't really get a chance to see him. Dalton Schultz is a solid tight end. He's getting up there in age or whatever. We can talk about a replacement. Obviously a running back is in the mix in terms of things to, but it's offensive line. That's the answer to the question. Texans pass protection ranked 30th in the NFL. His sack numbers did drop, but largely that was due to his mobility more so than the blocking itself. At least that is as a non-Texans game watcher, that is the consensus. Caden Proctor is the most popular pick, but he was gone at pick 17 for us. I think he's moving up the boards a little bit too fast. And since I think, you could kind of go anywhere on the offensive line, the top prospect by a pretty wide margin right now is Caleb Lomu, offensive tackle out of Utah. I know you just drafted Ariante Ursary in the second round last year as your left tackle, but, he wasn't good, so, we could try him at right tackle. We could try him inside or something at 330. Maybe he could be a guard. I don't know. But Lomu's going to be the new left tackle, so we're just going to have to deal with that. So, officially, with the 28th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Houston Texans select Caleb Lomu, offensive tackle, Utah. Okay, LA Rams at pick 29. It's another team that has multiple picks in this draft. We had them taking Jermod McCoy, which was very, very popular for them. The other second pick is actually also very popular, but he is long gone, and that is Ty Simpson, quarterback at Alabama. We talked about that. The possibility of taking him at 13, even though it was kind of an out there deal, but it's a question of, do you look for that next guy? The idea that he's just going to fall to you at your next pick, yeah, good luck with that. At this point, the next quarterback would be Trinidad out of Mississippi, the quarterback. And again, I don't know if we're that desperate. If that was your move, then you take Ty Simpson earlier, or possibly trade back or something to try to get him in a different spot. At this point, I feel like we're doing the all-in thing, and we'll deal with the quarterback later. The next most popular pick for them is Avion Terrell, who went to the Vikings at 18, so that ain't going to happen. Then Kevin Concepcion, he's gone, followed by Blake Miller, offensive tackle out of Clemson. I have him at 48 on the consensus board here. Interestingly enough, if you zoom out a little bit over a longer period of time, the top prospect, although close, is Monroe Freeling, with Caleb Lomu also in the mix. Presumably the issue here is going to be Rob Havenstein. He is going on 34 years old, had himself a really rough year. Long time, pretty reliable football player, had a injury-riddled season that did not go very well, so we're probably going to be looking for a replacement there. So presumably you'd be looking more so for a right tackle. Don't know how much we care about that, but the top offensive tackle on the board, although he did primarily play left tackle the last couple of years, he has played a good amount of right tackle. And so with the 29th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the LA Rams select Monroe Freeling, offensive tackle, Georgia. So again, he played both right and left tackle in 2023, right and left tackle in 2024, and was exclusively a left tackle in 2025. He has almost 300 snaps at right tackle. So he'll be able to go wherever we need him. The other option that does make a good amount of sense is Blake Miller out of Clemson. He is a right tackle. In fact, he's got 3,631 snaps at right tackle while at Clemson, but he is at consensus 48 on the big board, and so it feels like a reach when we have Monroe Freeling here, just based on the way the board is right now. With the 30th pick, the Denver Broncos will select Anthony Hill Jr., linebacker out of Texas. This one wasn't super intuitive for me, just looking at the situation, but you got to do a little bit of digging into some of their needs. Their linebacker group doesn't seem terrible, although they're pretty. I mean, they're doing pretty well everywhere. But the fact that they seem desperate, just based on the mocks. I mean, you look at all the top picks, outside of Sadiq, which every team seems to want Sadiq, and none of them are going to get Sadiq. Except one, obviously. Linebacker is very popular in mocks to the Broncos. And again, Singleton is a solid player, or at least he had a good year, but 32 years old. He's also an unrestricted free agent looking for a pretty big contract, and it's not known whether or not that's going to be given to him. Then you got Justin Stranad. He apparently has drawn a line in the sand. It's not usually this psychotic, I apologize. Saying he's not coming back to Denver unless it is for a guaranteed starting role in a multi-year deal. He wants to play, and he wants to get paid to be a starter. Well, then you have Dre Greenlaw. Dre Greenlaw is a good football player. The issue is Dre Greenlaw has a lot of injury issues. He's been a bit of a salary cap casualty with his specifically Achilles and hamstring issues. So there is a path to not needing a linebacker. There's also a path to we don't have any linebackers. So this is going to be some pretty solid insurance, making sure that we have a solid player like Anthony Hill at linebacker. Then the final two picks, we don't have the correct order on this yet, but it is assumed to be the Patriots, so we'll go with the Patriots at pick 31. Patriots are another tough one. There really isn't a strong consensus. The biggest name seems to be Cassius Howell, who's already gone for us, followed by Akeem Mesidor. He is still available, and we may go that route, but there's at least worth debating a couple things. We talked about offensive tackle Blake Miller out of Clemson. They've got right tackle Morgan Moses, who's still a good football player, but he's going to be 35 years old. That's obviously not sustainable, and so they're going to have to look at finding a replacement for him. That is at least an option. There's also the question of wide receiver. Stephon Diggs is 32 years old, still a very good receiver, but there is potentially a question of life after Diggs. And then there's interior offensive line. Their center is Garrett Bradbury, who they brought over, who is not very good at all. Could they possibly go grab a guy like Connor Lew? But again, I want to lean in toward what most of the fan base and the people are saying. And although, again, not a consensus at all, edge rusher and Akeem Mesidor, for the most part, makes the most sense. Now, I will say, normally I would just take TJ Parker because he is an edge rusher and he's higher up than Mesidor, although it's close. But the consensus seems to be that Mesidor is much more of a Vrabel type of a guy than TJ Parker is. Mesidor is an older guy, 6-year senior, 25 years old, but this is a team in the Super Bowl, potentially a Super Bowl champion team. So, the ability to get a guy in that can, on day one, just hit the gas, hit the ground running, kind of appealing. TJ Parker's more of a bet on the traits type of a guy. He's kind of a Rashawn Gary type of a guy. So it's kind of a question of, are you in sort of a rebuilding or building phase where you can draft TJ Parker and kind of groom him into potentially this elite top-end prospect? Or do you take Akeem Mesidor, who on day one, week one, is just an absolute wrecking ball on the defensive line? At least that's the thought process. You never know how these things are actually going to turn out. I think you go Mesidor, for the Patriots specifically. All right, and then finally, and this did take a little longer than I thought, but I'm sure you don't mind, Seattle Seahawks, presumably the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. And this one is interesting because there is a very strong consensus, although the guy is long gone. So I don't know who's doing these mock drafts that have Brandon Cisse, if that's how you say his name, falling all the way to 32, but we had him going 20 to Dallas. So that obviously is not going to work. The next pick, though, is Colton Hood, cornerback out of Tennessee. So there's kind of a pattern emerging here, and that is Seattle Seahawks fans want a corner for their team. Seems a little bit odd on its face with a guy like Devin Witherspoon, who was PFF's highest graded corner, has been a phenomenal player for them for 3 years. But a team needs more than one corner. They did also draft Nick Emmanwori, who's sort of that slot safety type of a guy. He's been fantastic. But on the other side, Josh Jobe, really bad at football. Maybe that's not fair to say, but I'm going to say it. The next two most popular are Pregnon and Jennings Dunker, which are going to be the interior offensive linemen, which I'll be honest is maybe a little bit more appealing to me. I get that having a liability at corner at a weakest link kind of a position like that, kind of a weakest link position, you can utilize your strong corners to impose, but still. The offensive line for Seattle has been a long time issue, and it remains an issue. They've got some tackle stuff figured out, but Gray Zabel, he's just a rookie, but he didn't have exactly an elite year. Jalen Sundell at center is nothing really spectacular, and then Anthony Bradford is just kind of terrible. Going out and getting like a Jennings Dunker, this big, strong, violent dude, just plug him in at right guard. I feel like we're making some progress here. Either way, I think it could work. There is also a question about Sam Darnold, but I don't think I can't imagine they do anything other than just lock him down. I mean, if he comes in, is an elite player and wins you a Super Bowl, I don't really care what his contract situation is. You're going to get that worked out, and he's going to stay. So I don't think that's really anything to worry about. I think edge is also something to consider. I don't see that being a main priority for them, but DeMarcus Lawrence is going to be 34 years old. Uchenna Nwosu is just not necessarily elite. I mean, his potentially his best year was 2022, and he's gotten worse every single year from there. Seattle fans apparently love the guy, but he's going to be very, very expensive, and almost none of the money that he's owed is guaranteed. So, a lot of injuries. There's some talk that they may look to save some space by moving on from Nwosu. So if you do that, and you have DeMarcus Lawrence, who's a billion years old, not to mention Leonard Williams is 32 years old and whatnot. Boye Mafe is a free agent. I mean, there's, again, I think edge is a very serious thing to consider. I'll be honest, I think you could talk wide receiver. Outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba, who is, maybe the best football player, best wide receiver out there right now. He's out of control. You got 33-year-old Cooper Kupp and Rashid Shaheed. Shaheed, by the way, free agent. So I think you can go in a lot of different directions. I'm just throwing that out there. With that said, corner does seem to be a priority among drafters, presumably Seattle Seahawks fans. It is pretty good value. TJ Parker is the best value at 26, Caleb Banks at 29, who I think most people would be shocked that he doesn't get drafted in the first round, but he didn't. And then next up is Colton Hood. So with the 32nd and final pick in the first round, the Seattle Seahawks will select Colton Hood, cornerback, Tennessee. All right. That is that. I appreciate all of you. And once again, what I'm going to do is hopefully I get some traction on this. I'm going to share this around. If you hate it, if you have thoughts, if you have questions, comments, concerns, if you just want to rant and rave about how dumb I am or how bad this pick is or how bad that team is, I don't really care. 608-561-3243 is the phone number to call. Please call in. I think we can have a lot of... I've said a million times, NFL draft fans are the worst fans. They're so angry all the time. They hate everything, everyone. Every pick is awful, except all their picks, which are perfect. But everybody else thinks your picks are terrible. And so I need some of that hateful energy. I need to hear that, not just in some stupid comment section. Call in. Let's do that. All right. Appreciate y'all hanging out, and we'll do this again tomorrow. Not a mock draft, something else. We'll see. Anyways, I'm out of here. Bye-bye.